Good morning or good afternoon, and welcome to today's Association of Contingency Planners webinar, Active Shooter in Your Workplace, Tactical Planning and Response. I'm Dr. Ed Goldberg with the Association of Contingency Planners. The ACP webinar series is sponsored by Continuity Housing, which guarantees pre-negotiated hotel rooms at substantial savings for the critical employees of larger and mid-sized companies in order to help prevent a business disruption in the event of a crisis. They've created a patent-pending guaranteed employee housing program which secures and protects hotel rooms for critical personnel and their families if needed, while saving companies significant expense. Continuity Housing has a 100% success record with their deployments, and each member of their team has at least 10 years of experience. If you'd like information on receiving a 30-minute analysis of your current housing plan or a strategy session about how to create a housing plan, visit continuityhousing.com or leave a comment in the survey that will pop up at the end of the webinar. This and all ACP webinar series webinars are recorded and are available on the Continuity Housing YouTube channel and in the members area of the ACP website. Please feel free to share the link to the recordings with your peers and anyone you think might be interested. You'll receive a link to the recording after the webinar via email along with the slide deck used in today's presentation. And speaking of that presentation, the Department of Justice, the FBI, New York Police Department all report that active shooter incidents quadrupled in the 2013 to 2014 versus the prior 5-year average. 70% of active shooters are in workplaces versus campuses. 3 people die and 3 or more are injured in the average active shooter incident. Active shooters strike malls, high-rises, healthcare facilities, factories, campuses, and your response is dramatically different at each site. This webinar will turn very tactical. You'll learn how to create plans and procedures and how to train your emergency team and rank and file employees. In today's presentation, we'll learn about how we prepare for tactical response, how we train employees for tactical response, who we can turn to create our tactical response and tactical training, what the laws and regulations are that apply to our planning and training, and what our liability exposure is for not doing this right or for not doing it at all. And we're fortunate to once again have a world-renowned presenter today. Bo Mitchell was Police Commissioner of Wilton, Connecticut for 16 years. He retired in February 2001 to found 911 Consulting, which creates emergency disaster recovery, business continuity, crisis communications, and pandemic plans, plus training and exercises. Good morning, Bo, and thank you once again for joining us.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about the tactical planning and response for active shooters in your workplace, so fasten your seatbelts. We're in for a bumpy ride. Our mission today is to make you ready to plan and train for active shooter at your site. I am Bo Mitchell. I was Police Commissioner of Wilton, Connecticut for 16 years. I retired in 2001 February to start 911 Consulting to work with organizations like yours regarding the safety of people like yours in workplaces like yours. All those initials after my name indicate I'm trained and board certified in 14 different times in emergency management, disaster recovery, business continuity, active shooters, workplace violence, high-rise safety, campus safety, chemical spills, homeland security, and a bunch of other stuff, some of which we're going to talk about today. I'm also an expert consultant in landmark legal cases with the expected settlements in the billions of dollars and the negligence issues against you at court when you are sued because somebody got injured or killed, or failure to plan and failure to train for emergencies. And we'll come back to that as an important part of our discussion today. Here are our clients at 911 Consulting, a lot of headquarters companies in which headquarters I have worked, as well as for their facilities across this land from General Electric to H&R Block, including 29 campuses, 25 secondaries, and 25 secondary schools and 4 colleges and universities across America. I've also worked in 37 high-rises. I mention that because high-rises are unique places to try to plan for active shooters, given the fact that you're in such a confined space. Those high-rises I've worked in are across this country of ours, from New York to San Francisco, from Kansas City to Boston, including 14 high-rises in New York City, one of which is the Waldorf Astoria, arguably the second safest house in America, because the people who work in the first safest house in America come here on average every 2 weeks. The president, the first lady, the vice president, the secretary is something very important. The Secret Service keeps a permanent installation here 24/7, 365 for anybody who wants to visit from the White House. And it's the only building in the world that has its own train station and its own parking garage, dedicated exclusively to one person, and has since Franklin Roosevelt was in the White House in the 1940s during World War II. I've also worked for 7 years the building on the right, number 7 World Trade Center, for the 500 bankers on the top 3 floors, 50, 51, 52. You think you have challenges. So let's talk about a tactical planning and response for an active shooter in your workplace. Active shooter, what does that mean? Well, it's been defined by the federal government as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined and populated area. That definition shouldn't surprise you. And what is the mission? Well, the research on this, and there's lots of research, is that the mission of the individual is to kill and injure as many people as possible. There's a stark reminder about what it is that they're about. As far as the history of active shooters in the United States, it goes back to 1764, when the first school shooting occurred, 12 years before the Declaration of Independence. More recently, the Connecticut State Lottery in 1998, Columbine in 99, Virginia Tech in 07, Hartford Distributors, where 9 people died in 10, Sandy Hook in December of 2012, malls all over the country. I've only listed 3 here. Malls seem to be a favorite place these days. And the U.S. Capitol has had active shooters on their premises since 1835, when somebody tried to kill Andrew Jackson in the Capitol, another active shooter. He failed, and he was executed. But it's all the way up to 2013. Some more examples. Police were responding to a law firm where a gentleman who had a divorce decree that he didn't like went in and killed the 2 lawyers who were on the plaintiff's side. 4 people died in a manufacturing setting in St. Louis. At the U.S. Capitol I mentioned, there always seems to be a guy running around with a gun. Hartford Distributors, a suicide after killing 8 people. That was that active shooter that day. And then, of course, there was the NASA contractor who worked at NASA for 10 years, was fired one night, lost all of his access privileges, nevertheless came back the next morning. But nobody had told the rest of the employees that he had been fired, so they all held the door for him. He walked in with a pistol and killed the 2 people who had fired him that day. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the face of workplace violence and active shooters in the United States of America. This looks like my 9th grade English teacher, but this is the face of active shooters. Be aware. So we're going to look at some research here from the New York City Police Department, NYPD, and the FBI. The FBI studies 160 cases where they studied active shooters over a 14-year period nationwide. As far as NYPD is concerned, they looked at over 200 cases, again nationwide, not just in New York, and both agencies found that this is an all-American kind of activity. And of course, what they were looking for initially is a profile. Can we see this guy coming? And the answer is no, we can't. He looks too much like you and me. The profile begins with male. Yes, almost all of them are male, and that sounds like a profile, but look at the age range, from 10 years old to 64 years old. Do they act alone? Yes, they do. So that helps us a little bit. Whether or not they have plans, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Are they familiar with the organization? Yes, they are 4 out of 5 times, but they just because they're familiar, it could have been like case the place, or they could have worked there, or they have a spouse there. There's no real guidance here. As far as employees are concerned, some were fired, some were current. Again, no real profile. The number of deaths in the average active shooter situation incident is 3. It isn't Sandy Hook at 26, but 3 people killed in your workplace is a pretty dramatic event. As far as injured are concerned, associated with those deaths, over 3 injured in the same average incident. So we often say, if I say active shooter, you say campus, and that's true, but only in 29%, only. In other workplaces, it's over 70%. So yes, this can happen to workplaces like yours and does all the time. So as far as weapons are concerned, active shooters in over a third of the cases carry more than one weapon, another firearm or a knife, As far as what they have, of course, they're shooters, so the second weapon is often another gun. How do these things get resolved? Only in 1 out of 7 cases, 14% are people arrested. The rest of the time, the person usually dies, either because of force, meaning they are arrested by the police department, shot by the police department, or another civilian who's a bystander, or they commit suicide. That 86% of the 2 top bullets combined is basically, in the view of most law enforcement agencies, the same thing. It was suicide by cop. These people come in knowing that they're not going out. So that's what it looks like in your workplace. A white male alone with a firearm injuring or killing people at your workplace. That's what he looks like. As far as an active shooter is concerned, as Ed mentioned, there's been a sharp spike in these things. Before Sandy Hook, the agencies recorded that the average was once a month over the previous 5 years for these kinds of incidents at both campuses and workplace. Since Sandy Hook, once a week. So these things have quadrupled in the period 2013-2014, which should be alarming because it is. Once a month is way too much. Once a week is over the top. So what is the active shooter mindset and what are the motives? Well, we know a little bit, having arrested some of these people and cross-examined them. As far as their mindset is concerned, usually targets an individual, somebody they want to go after, a particular employee with whom they work, a boss, for instance, or a spouse or an intimate partner. The targets can be generalized. I don't like that organization, so I'm going to go in and kill as many people. Kills without any qualms, not afraid of capture or own death. They go in expecting not to come out. Shoots targets of opportunity while searching for that individual or individuals, or targets of opportunity after the intended persons have been shot or have not been found, because often they go into the organization, they can't find anybody, but they then submit their carnage anyway. As far as motives are concerned, we don't know in 3 out of 5 cases because the person died and we weren't able to determine that. But in 1/5 of them, it is workplace related, some kind of controversy or conflict that was not resolved, except at this particular point. 7% academic retaliation and 14% are domestic disputes. It's the opinion of most people that this is often about intimate partner violence and also about being fired or somehow submitted to a conflict amongst fellow employees. Those are the major stressors. So how do we make you ready to plan and train for an active shooter at your site? Well, we're going to get very, very technical here. And we've talked about this before, run, hide, fight. This has been around a long time. The run, hide, fight continuum of decision-making that we want to train for employees. And it's a good one. There are others out there that are also good. I prefer to stick with this one. It's short and sweet. But the first thing we have to do, amend as far as a tactical response is concerned is we have to alert. We got to tell people we have a problem. So I'm going to modify run, hide, fight here for purposes of our discussion today to include alert, run, hide, fight, and we really do need to take these things in order. But please, I have a disclaimer here. The generalities are dangerous. We have to make this specific to your people and your site. And while we're going to talk about some very, very tactical responses that we can recommend for you today, you have to understand that your site is different from all the rest. Your site is unique, and we want to be able to understand exactly what it is that we're doing here as far as your site is concerned. So what is your response from a tactical standpoint? As I said, alert, run, hide, fight. So let's talk about alert initially. Do we call 911 first? Is that the first thing we do? Or do we notify your people first inside the facility who are going to be immediately affected by this particular incident? And my recommendation to you is you want to alert your people first. As we'll see in a moment, calling 911 is absolutely critical. We want to do it as quickly as possible. But getting the word out to your people first is absolutely necessary to the tactical response, because clearly, I don't think I have to say it more than once, they can't respond if they don't know that the incident has begun. So the first job we have is to make sure that everybody in the facility knows that they're now being submitted to this tactical situation of a guy with a gun. So what's the fast way of alerting all your people? Well, hopefully you have a PA or emergency notification system or two-way radios or email. Best that you have all of the above, because in emergencies like this, redundancy is a beautiful thing. Redundancy is a beautiful thing. Redundancy is a beautiful thing. So we want to have a number of ways, fast, to notify all the people in the organization, in that particular facility where the incident is unfolding. We don't want to use codes. Mr. Blue is in the building is not sufficient because nobody remembers the codes, because we don't train this well enough and we don't train it often enough. So no one's going to remember the codes. We want plain language, which, by the way, is the standard now in all police departments, EMT agencies, and fire departments across America. Plain language. We talk openly about what's going on, and we make sure that everybody understands what we're doing. And you want to keep communicating, because the situation is going to unfold. It's going to unfold quickly. So if he is an active shooter and he is moving, we want to keep telling everybody what's going on so that they can do the run, hide, fight part of it, because if they don't know where the guy is, this becomes infinitely more difficult. Yes, we want you to call 911. Hopefully when an active shooter comes in, you can notify your people and split the job up, because you have people who are ready to respond. That's the tactical response you need to address. And calling 911 and alerting your people inside the facility is happening simultaneously. Now, calling 911 is simple, right? Wrong. Calling 911 from your workplace is not simple. And because you don't do this very often, not many people know how to do this right. What's the first question the dispatcher is going to ask you when you dial 911 from your cell phone or a landline? No, he's not going to want to ask what your emergency is. He's going to ask what your address is, because he or she doesn't know where you are. Most 911, almost all my 911 systems have no idea where you are. Yes, they have a dot on a screen, but they don't believe the dot on the screen, because all too many calls, 80% was what the research says, come from mobile telephones when you're using a cell phone, not a fixed address like the one you might be using as a calling 911 from using a cell phone from your workplace. They're going to ask you what your address is because they don't trust what they see on their screen, and they've got to get the address. You'll be surprised how many of your people don't know what your address is, even though they drive or somehow commute to work every day. They don't know what the address is, and they really need to know what the address is that will be seen on the screen so that we make this connection quickly, because speed is of the essence. Then they're going to want to know what your location is in the building, where the shooter is, any description of the shooter, and the number of your people. Now, you may not know where the shooter is or a description thereof because you didn't see him. You're working off of other information. That's fine, but you need to be able to answer these questions. We need to train our employees on how to call 911 in any kind of emergency, especially an active shooter. They're also going to want to know how many people you have in your facility, how many levels in your facility, because the dispatcher is not going to know this information. Whether or not there are injuries, the number of perpetrators. Describe the perpetrators if possible, and more. You're probably, when you dial 911, going to be asked by the dispatcher to stay on the line throughout the entire incident. Bear all this in mind as you train your employees. Calling 911 is not simple, yet your report is absolutely critical to get the process started from the viewpoint of law enforcement. This is complicated stuff. It's not simple. Please remember the dispatcher doesn't trust to know where you are when you dial 911 from your facility. The NSA knows where you are, but the dispatcher at 911 doesn't know where you are. So you have to tell them. Rule number 2, never pull the fire alarm. This happens all the time. And people proudly announce to police officers during the after-action report, yeah, I pulled the fire alarm. This is a bad thing to do because you're sending your people out into the line of fire thinking that it is a fire when indeed they're about to be fired on. Again, getting people fast information quickly is the alert part. Pulling the fire alarm is a really bad idea. It's not an active shooter alarm, it's a fire alarm, and that's how people are going to respond. So we've talked about alert. What about run? Well, run means listen to the alerts, determine the active shooter's position, and absent yourself if possible. So you don't want to be part of this thing, and that's the run part. Often we forget it. We just start to hide. We go into a lockdown position. But if you can absent yourself from the incident, that's the very best thing to do. But you need to know where you are, and you don't want to be escaping and running into the arms or into the gunpoint of the active shooter. So again, the alert part tells us where that active shooter is. If he's on a different floor or a different part of the building, then run is absolutely the best thing to do to absent yourself from the incident. Then we have hide. Hide almost always means a lockdown, which can look like that, maybe depending upon your facility. And generally speaking, a lockdown means move to the nearest room. A windowless room is best. Windowless meaning internal and external windows. Close the door, lock the door, barricade the door, arrange the furniture, hide. Please, please, please silence your cell phone. Don't answer the door, and only let the police department in uniform clear your room for you, because you don't want to respond to the active shooter who's trying to play you. So generally speaking, that's what a lockdown looks like. But we're going to talk about the tactical issues here regarding an office situation like where a lockdown is we just described, a conference room situation, larger rooms like a theater setting, open cubicles. If you work in a cubicle farm, a lockdown is very, very complicated, probably impossible. Hallways, bathrooms. Please understand that you may have these kinds of tactical situations different from everybody else who's on this webinar. And so in each situation, it's going to be different. I'm going to take you through these things one by one, but understand you could have a facility that has one or all of these things in that very same facility, or you may have responsibility for many different facilities, all of which cover these different kinds of tactical situations. So let's start with an office or a conference room. You want to take in others if possible. You're not in the position of being a hero here and keeping the door open and you in the hall for a long period of time. But there are people standing right next to you. Bring them in and close the door, lock the door. Lock the door, barricade the door, turn off the lights, cover windows, both interior and external, if you can. If you can't, you shouldn't. And then silence phones. So that's what an office or a conference room situation would look like. In a large open area, as far as cubicles are concerned, as an example, determine the shooter's position, because, again, you don't want to lock down, you don't want to stay there if you don't have to. Absenting yourself is the best thing to do. Move away towards an exit, exit the building if possible. If you're in an office, though, and you get caught, or you've gone from a cubicle situation to an office, in which you can barricade yourself, then you go into a lockdown mode. If too close to the shooter, then you're going to have to fight. We're going to come back to that in a moment. If you're in the hallway, move towards an office or a conference room. Go away from the shooter if you can. Again, running or absenting yourself is the best thing to do. Exit the building if possible. Hide in a bathroom, an office, or a conference room if you're in a hallway. So that's what happens if you are alerted to an active shooter if you're standing in a hallway. Bathrooms, determine the shooter's position if possible. Again, if you don't have to be a part of this incident, you don't want to be. If you are now part of it because you can't determine the position and you've made the decision all by yourself that to leave the bathroom would be the more dangerous thing to do, then you want to lock the door and stay behind that locked door until you're cleared by a police officer. So that's how we look at each of those different kinds of places to have to do the hiding part of our alert, run, hide, fight. Now let's talk about fight. Fight is a last resort. Please, when you talk to your employees, when you set your procedure, when you train everybody, this is a last resort. Yes, we're now in the business of training and orienting our employees, our visitors, who's ever on premises when the time comes to fight somebody, because it is the last resort. And how do we do that? Well, we try to disrupt and incapacitate the shooter. We attack as fast as we can. If there's more than one of you, we attack together. We throw hard objects. We throw liquid or all of the above. We yell, we shout, we scream. We keep up the attack, and we escape as if, when, as, and if we can. Freezing, another F word, is not a good thing to do when you're in this position. You want to fight, and you want to fight as quickly as possible and use all of the instruments that I've mentioned here and all of the behaviors that I've mentioned here in order to fight that person, in order to save your lives. Once again, this is a last resort. Now, when you talk to police officers anywhere in the country, when we start talking about active shooter, hostage barricade are the words that are almost always associated with it. So now we need to talk about hostage, because we're going to keep very tactical here today, and a hostage barricade situation happens in a great many of these incidences. So we'll talk about a hostage incident as far as the observer is concerned through that perspective, and also if you're the hostage. Let's talk about hostage barricade. Again, this is something that happens almost automatically in too many cases as far as an active shooter is concerned, because the person comes in the facility, commits his carnage, and then takes somebody hostage and barricades himself. If you are the observer of a hostage situation, move away and exit the immediate area. Warn others as you move without screaming, do not yell, and do not pull the fire alarm, because this just makes everybody crazy and has everybody doing the wrong things. So if you're the observer, this is what you're supposed to be doing. Warn others you move, and of course we want to continue to call 911. It's okay if we keep calling 911 because the situation is changing and we want to keep those people informed. If you're the hostage, avoid reckless and sudden actions. Time is on your side. The FBI, the NYPD report that the longer these incidents goes, if you're the hostage, the better it is. Hostage taker is nervous as you because this was a spontaneous, he really didn't plan this. Comply with the hostage taker's orders, sit, submit, keep eye contact unless he tells you otherwise. No suggestions. You're not Bruce Willis. You're not going to talk him out of this thing. You're not in a Hollywood movie. You're in a real-life situation. You've all been watching too much TV. So don't get into a conversation with him that's going to suddenly change everything. Tell the hostage taker your name. My name is Jane. I have a husband and 3 children. I want to go home tonight safe. Make yourself real, not just part of a herd of people who have been subject to this active shooter or hostage taker's whim for the day. The police department will be working for your release. Indeed, the local police department, really departments, because they'll be augmented by other departments, and the FBI and the state police will all show up with only one objective, to get you out of here. And as I said before, time is on your side. Don't make any decisions that say, oh, if I don't do something quickly, this will only get worse and I'm going to die. That's simply not true. So you want to cooperate, submit, no suggestions, and know that the police department and all police agencies are working for your release. As far as barricade is concerned, what does that mean? Well, the active shooter barricades himself with the hostage, often or alone, holds known or unknown numbers of people, refuses to surrender, but this gives ample time to the police department to plan and negotiate how they extricate the hostage taker and any hostages he may have taken. But it can turn around. He may escape from that particular barricade situation and again turn into an active shooter. These are very dangerous, unpredictable incidences, and we have to act accordingly. So that's alert, run, hide, fight. It's a continuum of decision-making, and it's very, very tactical because we have to arm all of our employees to make these decisions, not necessarily on their own, hopefully in concert with other employees and with arriving emergency services, but they have to be able to act individually in order to make this happen. Also remember, once again, the generalities are dangerous. We have to make this specific to your people and your site. So what's missing here? Well, the research tells us what's missing here, and that is all of these incidents over in 8 minutes. None of them lasted longer than 8 minutes, and most of them lasted on the bell-shaped curve 4 or 5 minutes. The whole 4-minute metaphor that we often use in emergency response for our medical facilities, for medical incidents, etc., fits here nicely. Many of these incidents are over in 4 to 5 minutes. So probably the police department can't help you because they can't get there and then into the building and then onto the particular part of the venue that's affected quickly enough. Which brings us to an insight you have to remember, inculcate in yourselves as you plan and train. Police, fire, and EMTs are not the first responders. They are the official responders. The first responders are always employees. Employees are always the first one to see the fire and pull the fire alarm. They're always the first one to see the guy with the gun. Employees are always the first responders. You cannot change the physics. You are in the facility and it's having an emergency, and it's the employees who are going to start the response to that emergency, which means that training is always important because we have to tell people what to do as far as responding to any emergency, especially an active shooter. So let's talk about the active shooter protocol. This is what's going to happen to you when you've done the right thing by calling 911. What's going to happen now? Well, we'll talk about what the police do first, what you as an employer do first, and then what both police and you as an employer do next. This stuff is complicated. You want to believe that the incident is over and that's that. Whatever carnage has been visited on you has been visited on you, but that's just the beginning of as far as the employer's responsibility working with the police for what will be a day or a week in the aftermath of these work of this active shooter. So what do the police do first? Well, the active shooter protocol is practiced by all police agencies everywhere in the United States. Each has its own way of looking at it, and you need to know how they are going to operate because that's your responsibility, your duty of care to know how to work with them. But in the end, they go in directly. Often the first officer there will go in alone and start to look for the guy with the gun. He may or she may wait for one other person as backup or not, or a team of people. Each jurisdiction does this differently, but their job is to go in directly. They want information from you. Again, employees of the first responders, they're going to have the information as to who he is, where he is, and what he has done to that point. The arriving police officers are not priests, and they aren't EMTs, so they're going to come in with their weapons, and if you're bleeding, they're going to step over you and keep moving. If you're blubbering in the corner, having been upset by this whole thing, and you've lost your composure, they're going to ignore you. They aren't police. They aren't EMTs. They got to find the guy with the gun, and that's what their job is. Find the guy with the gun and then kill him. We'll use neutralize. That's the politically correct thing that we say in all of these written active shooter protocols, but this is the active shooter protocol, which can be melted down into the simple three-part phrase: go into the building, find the guy with the gun, kill him. This is what the active shooter protocol is in every agency in the United States of America. So that's what the police do. What do you do? How do you help them? How do you respond and work with them to make this happen? Well, first, you have to tell all of your employees they're going to have to raise their hands and keep them raised. They're going to be ordered to do this by the police department. We aren't asking, we are ordering. The police department, when they come in, have the statutory right to take over the building and give orders. No one is going to convene. We aren't going to vote. We don't care what your feelings are. You have to raise your hand and keep them raised, and you'll be ordered to do so. All of your employees, visitors, contractors, whomever. Meet with that person coming in, that police officer coming in, if possible. Meet with him or her to start to brief them on your facility, what it looks like, how it's organized, how it's mapped out. Give that police officer the information. He or she will start giving orders to you. You need to follow those orders. And then you need to relay all those orders to your people. So when you hear the expression that when police, fire, ambulance show up, they, quote, take command of the building, yes, they do, and that's their responsibility and right under law, but they're going to have to operate with you in order to make that work because they don't have enough people to go up to each and every one of your people, hold their hand, look into their eyes, and say, please do the following things. No, they're going to turn to you and say, give this order, move these people around, shelter in place, whatever. Then the police department is going to want you to remain available for the next steps. You need to go to assembly areas. Why? Because we need to have a head count. Head count is required under federal law in any emergency for your employees and your visitors. Especially important during an active shooter situation because we can have a hostage situation, we can have a barricade situation, we can have people killed and injured. We need to have a head count of who is in and who is out and what they're, and account for all those personnel inside your facility. That was the first 8 things, right? Those are the first 8 things you're going to have to do as far as your response to the active shooter protocol and your responsibility as the employer. Continuing, do not pull the fire alarm, do not carry bags and cell phones. You have to order your people. Hopefully you've trained them so that none of you challenge you on this. Do not move the wounded. That's not your job. We need to keep the people who can be moved well and moving out of the facility. Do not stop and ask officers. Do not move, suddenly scream, point, and yell and grab officers. This happens all the time, as if you're a child and you're grabbing for your parent as they come into a situation like this. You're not a child, and they aren't your parents. They're carrying weapons, and you don't want to be pointing and yelling at them. These are the officers coming in. Please remember, many of them are in their 20s and 30s. Almost all of them are male, high in testosterone and adrenaline, coming into a building, looking for a guy with a gun to kill him. We don't want to yell and point at these people. We want to cooperate and take their orders. We go to our assembly areas. We stay out of parking lots. All too many of you have set up your assembly areas in parking lots. It's a bad idea under any emergency situation, especially bad with an active shooter, with deploying emergency services, all of whom are coming in fast and hard and hot. They want to park their vehicles. Some of them are police cars, ambulances, command centers, and there you are with a couple hundred employees standing in the parking lot at your assembly area. Don't do this stuff. Move your assembly areas out of the parking lot. And did I mention head count? Yes, I did. I'm going to keep mentioning head count because it's one of the most important things that the incident commander from the police agency is going to ask you for. So we've talked about what police do first and what you do first as an employer. Now, what do the police department you do next? Because even when the incident is concluded in the first few minutes, let's say 10 minutes, we're here for a long siege thereafter of things that have to be done. And let's first look at it through the eyes of the police department. Identifying friend from foe. IFF, as the military has identified it over all these years, they assume that when they come in that all of you are suspects because they don't know friend from foe, so all of you are suspects. They're going to, as far as the police are concerned, in the immediate incident, the second groups of officers are going to come in, probably form up teams after the initial officers are gone in to find the guy with the gun to kill him. The next arriving officers, number of arriving officers will form teams. Those teams may be to back up the initial teams going in or initial officer going in. They may be there to establish a perimeter, and they may need your help in that because there's going to be a manpower shortage on part of police when they're coming in because they have lots of things to do about this active shooter. They may need you, your security, your facilities, your maintenance people, or your people generally set up a perimeter so that we get people out because we've established safety corridors. Safety corridors are important because there are probably a lot of people in your buildings and they all have to be rushed out of the building in an appropriate and safe manner under the supervision of the police department, and we want safety corridors established to do that. Police department may search everyone, may detain everyone. Understand that they have a statutory right once they have been called for this kind of incident to come onto your premises and take command of it. They own it now. But they need you to help them do it. So you cannot step back and say, throw your hands up and say, well, they own it, I don't have any more responsibilities. That's simply not true. But they may search everyone and they may detain everyone because they don't know from foe. They may order shelter in place, lockouts, head counts, etc. for various parts of the facility that are affected during this incident. They may deploy dogs, tear gas. Who knows what they're going to do? That's for them to decide, but they're going to need your help and cooperation to get this job done. So if that's what they're going to do as the next steps after the immediate incident is over, what do you do? What are your responsibilities here? Well, you want to help them, the police department, identify friend from foe, because you know the people they don't. Now, the active shooter could be employees, so your knowing them alone may not be enough, but you need to start the process to help them. Head counts are super important, and you're probably going to be asked to continue to do head counts as people show up as the incident unfolds. Provide maps, floor plans for the entire facility, MSDS, material safety data sheets, because every one of your facilities has some kind of chemicals on board that can be used as weapons or can be in the way of responding police and fire. They need to know where that chemical inventory is laid out. They may need directions about how to move around. They need people who are qualified, who are familiar with the facility in order to get that done. That's you. They can't provide that information. That's your responsibility. And provide facilities help. Arriving officers, and there are going to be lots of emergency services showing up, scores if not hundreds, depending upon where you are and who you are, over the ensuing parts of the incident. They'll need bathrooms. They'll need water. They'll need power for their two-way radios and for their cell phones. They're going to need a lot. They're going to need a place for a break. They may need food. All of this is going to be on you because you're the facility to which they're responding, and you need to help them. You want to help them. And please remember, these are the people who are coming through the front door, high on testosterone and adrenaline, carrying automatic weapons. So we have to know what to do when they get there because this is a dangerous situation by definition. And this is not a natural thing for employees in your facility to do. Walking around holding up their hands for a long period of time is not something that our employees are used to doing. This is a facility going through an actual active shooter situation last fall in California, and you can see that these people are being escorted out of the building. Now, what's wrong with this picture? Now I've made you experts. Tell me what's wrong with this picture. Well, first, she's carrying a bag. You're not supposed to be carrying bags. They could have a device or another firearm in it. She's carrying a cell phone. To someone high on adrenaline and testosterone at a distance, that can look like a pistol. If you think I'm exaggerating, I'm not. This has already happened in any number of jurisdictions across the country over the last decade, including New York City, where somebody was trying to surrender, holding a cell phone in his hand. He didn't speak English. He didn't drop what they thought was a weapon, so they shot and killed him. This stuff is dangerous. You got to know what to do. You have to train your employees. This guy thinks he's on a break. You know, we got to train our employees to know what this is doing, because this is not a joke. We need to get this job done. We need to get it done efficiently, and we got to have a duty of care to keep our employees safe. And I love this photograph. This is a university, not this past winter, but the winter before. In the line closest to you in the image are male staff and students being lined up with their hands, holding their hands up on a continual basis, being frisked in the center bottom of the image by male detectives, and the line up above are female staff and students being frisked at the end of the line as they hold their hands up by a female detective. Can this happen on your facility? Absolutely. This is the active shooter protocol. No one's asking you if you think this is a good idea. This is what you're going to be ordered to do, and it's your responsibility to plan and train for your employees. And what's the biggest mistake we find in these tactical situations? The biggest mistake committed by employees: they confront the perpetrator. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But it happens with great regularity that the employee confronts the perpetrator, having been notified or alerted that indeed he is walking around, and they confront him. I have no idea what that is, but employees do this all the time. Maybe they think they're superheroes. I think they've been watching too much TV. It's an emotional decision that should not be done. So we've talked about tactical planning for an active shooter, and we have to pull the camera back a little bit and put a context here. An active shooter is workplace violence. It is the most articulated kind of workplace violence, but it is all workplace violence, which brings us to the iceberg principle. You know the iceberg principle. You only see 15% of the iceberg. The real damage is done below the surface that you can't see. So I'm going to borrow this analogy as far as an active shooter and workplace violence is concerned. We talk about active shooters, but below that is the daily workplace violence that occurs in just about every workplace in the United States of America every hour of every day. In fact, the average employer in the United States of America is 18 times more likely to have workplace violence than a fire at work. 18 times more likely, says the federal government. 2 million workplace violence incidences annually, says the Department of Justice, and they say that this is markedly underreported. 2 people will be murdered today in the workplace with a firearm or a knife. Homicides every day in the workplace. 2 people are killed by a firearm or a knife. 26 women will be raped in the hour that we spend together today at this webinar. 26 women will be raped in the American workplace. 44 robberies, 200 aggravated assaults, 1,000 simple assaults, 3,000 threats. This is all workplace violence. It may not be your definition, but it is the definition of all federal agencies. And these are the definitions that we have to go by, whether or not you agree with them. So threatening somebody verbally is workplace violence. Touching somebody aggressively is workplace violence. And we'll see in a moment, it can be cyber stalking and bullying. Workplace violence is epidemic, says the CDC. And there are myths about workplace violence, myths that are held by you and certainly by your managements. It can't happen here because bad things never happen to nice people, and we're all nice people. It only happens at 7-Elevens, total bull. People snap, it can't be anticipated. That's never true. Educated people are not violent. Ha! Well-to-do people are not violent. Well, everybody knows that. Talking about violence will make it happen. If a person can joke about violence, they won't become violent. And people who threaten violence are just looking for attention. Well, maybe attention of a certain kind. All of this is mythology. All of it's wrong. And there's one more myth, and it's the most dangerous myth, and that is that we've done something. No, you haven't. You haven't done anything about workplace violence. Well, maybe you have a policy. Hey, we're against it. But that's not doing anything about it, because you don't have any planning, you don't have any procedures, you don't have any training, you don't have any drills, you don't have any exercises. So this is doing something about it. Planning, procedures, training, drills, exercises. So what's the research? Well, it comes in many forms, says the federal government, and all this research comes out of federal agencies. Violence, as we've discussed, intimate partner violence, stalking, and bullying. There's a continuum that's been developed to tell you how this works. Yes, in the lower right-hand corner we have the physical aggression, but it all starts with discourtesy, disrespect, intimidation, harassment, retaliation, verbal assault. This is all workplace violence, and this is why people don't snap. It all is a continuum of stuff, and we see it in front of us, but we don't report it, we don't respond to it. So once again, the iceberg is we see the physical attack, but what about all the other stuff that's happening day by day, hour by hour in our workplaces? This we pay no attention to. We just don't pay attention to it. This is a cultural phenomenon. Yet we have to pay attention to it if we want to stop this most aggressive of the kinds of workplace violence that we're talking about. Then there's intimate partner violence. The federal government's done a lot of research here. IPV, intimate partner violence, men and women are victims. 1/3 of female assault, homicides every year come from intimate partner violence. Over 5 million incidents per year, 2 million injuries, 1,300 people dead. Over 500,000 require medical attention, 18 million and more mental health visits per year. And then there's stalking. Lots of research on stalking. 3 million employees report that they've been victims of stalking. 46% say they get unwanted contacts every week. 11% have been stalked for 5 years and more. High-risk groups are those who are going through divorce and separations. Women are at greater risk of stalking than men, but men and women are both in the group. And 1/4 report cyber stalking. This research is done by the federal government 5 years ago. We can all well imagine that this is well over a half report cyber stalking, because it's just too simple to reach out and find somebody to stalk them via your workplace and the computers in your workplace. And then there's workplace bullying. We talk about campus bullying a lot, and appropriately, because it is widespread. But we've done something about campus bullying. We have laws in just about every 50 state about campus bullying, and we have people on the alert to do something about it. Workplace bullying, though, we don't pay any attention to. There are no laws or regulations in the United States against this kind of stuff, but workplace bullying is epidemic as well. How do I know? Well, the research is here. 37% of all American workers, 54 million, report that they have been the victims of workplace bullying. Another 12% have witnessed this happen. So half of your employees, on average, have seen or are victims of workplace bullying. 72% of bullies are supervisors, 60% are male. It's equal male on male, male to female, female to female, 2/3 less female to male. Still epidemic. 57% of the targets are women. So what are our goals here now that we have this research and we know what's out there? Well, we want to reduce the risk of workplace violence, minimize personal and organizational suffering, and reduce the organization's and the individual's liability. Yes, we want to cover our posteriors as far as all this is concerned. So what are the common warning signs of workplace violence that lead to these active shooter and other kinds of physical assaults? First, a history of violence, threats, threats, or repeated discipline. Difficulty controlling temper, substance abuse, excessive fascination with weapons, paranoid thought patterns, major stressors, frequent unresolved conflicts, feeling excluded. This is all about the workplace and the stress that is in your workplace. Destructive behaviors, feeling unfairly wronged, major mood swings, few social supports, isolation, deteriorating social situation, rigid work environment, bullying or victimization, and work trysts and cliques. So these are the warning signs of all kinds of workplace violence, including the most negative kinds of workplace violence. If somebody demonstrates any one or two of these behaviors, that doesn't mean necessarily they're going to be active shooters or do something ugly. But these are the common warning signs, the red flags that you as an employer should be looking for in order to interject yourself and head off anything that continues to be something to be much worse than this. Which brings us to the 4 S's. See something, say something. Not only good for the New York subway system where it was developed years ago, but just great for your workplace. If you see something, you got to report this stuff. We don't like to do that now, but you got to report this stuff. You got to report these behaviors. So let's take you through some scenarios to familiarize yourself as to how this can look like in your particular facility. First, a manager who runs an important department, which is very successful, yells and curses employees on a regular basis. He recently punched another employee in the arm after the employee insulted him at a company social event. Is this workplace violence? Oh, yes, it is on so many levels, as far as his threatening, his verbal assaults, and his actual touching of somebody. A manager reports he believes another is carrying a knife or a gun. Now, depending upon your state, you may think that this is okay, but most workplaces ban this kind of stuff. Now, this gets very local and very specific, and your workplace has to be looked at carefully in this regard. But carrying a knife or gun in the workplace is certainly, in most states, something that most employers ban, and even those states where it is allowed, this is a very, very difficult situation. You have to have procedures, and you have to worry about behaviors. Remember, the active shooter protocol is the police officers come into the building, find the guy with the gun, and kill him. So if you have people who are permitted to have guns, you have to think about that and how we coordinate with police. Another scenario, you see two staffers angry at pushing each other. Does it matter if they report to you? No, it doesn't. This is workplace violence, and we have to have a cultural shift to make sure we report it. Another scenario, a secretary and executive seem to be having an intimate relationship. This isn't workplace violence on its surface, but we all know where this goes because that secretary and executive have partners, in all likelihood, who are going to be very upset about this kind of stuff, and this can be the warning sign of intimate partner violence at your facility. Another scenario, a guard asks someone to move their vehicle, they object, state their high rank in the company, and call the guy a jerk. Well, you can imagine he didn't call him a jerk, he called him something much worse. This is workplace violence, this is intimidation, this is a verbal assault, and you have to report this stuff. Another scenario, an email that is sent to 10 people is critical of the work of one employee. This is not workplace violence on its surface, but this is the kind of conflict resolution that has to be resolved in your workplace because this is a warning sign. Another scenario, you have to terminate an employee who is unpopular, lives alone, and has been known to crush soda cans when angry or provoked. This is a warning sign, and you have to be prepared that this could turn into workplace violence. An employee's behavior changes. He becomes bizarre, scowls, stares, and fellow employees become uncomfortable. Supervisors order counseling under threat of termination. Continuing with that same scenario, after counseling, EAP recommend anger management training, then is returned to work. But in hearing this, the supervisors were very uncomfortable, so they demanded that they get a copy, they get a signed waiver from the employee to permit HR to review the EAP results. And what it turned out is that the bizarre behavior was caused by personal issues, had nothing to do with the people inside the organization, and this made everybody comfortable, and he returned to work. Is this complicated? Did this take a long time? It sure did, but we addressed the conflict and resolved it. A female supervisor wonders if profanity is an indicator of violent behavior. She felt that much of this should be ignored, but one employee's profane behavior was frightening, especially as he grew more vulgar and loud. Continuing, when questioned, it was revealed that he started his frightening profanity when he started to lose an argument. He was using his language to threaten fellow employees to get them to back down. So once everybody understood what this was a conflict that was resolved. These behaviors have no business need whatsoever in your facility. They're totally inappropriate for the business world, thus there is no need to tolerate low-level aggression or to wonder when it is right to intervene. See something, say something. And I've seen that the biggest threat in your organization, denial. This is your management team when we come to the subject of workplace violence. Everybody is in denial about this stuff because they don't want to talk about it. And that means we don't have any planning, procedures, training, drills, and exercises. We hope that this just goes away. So why do we plan and why do we train? Well, we have a duty of care to keep everybody safe. And OSHA is not a town in Wisconsin. We're required by federal law to keep everybody safe in the workplace. OSHA and workplace violence, well, there is 1910.34, that's the regulation citation, which says that 34 through 39 apply to workplaces in general industry except for mobile workplaces such as vehicles or vessels, which means that you have to have an emergency action plan. That's 1910.38. And that plan has to cover foreseeable circumstances And here we are with workplace violence and foreseeable circumstance. Then there's a general duty clause under OSHA. Each employer shall furnish a place of employment free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause death or serious physical harm to employees. So this ought to be a subtext, a subheadline to workplace violence, because certainly that's what an active shooter is all about. And then there are the enforcement guidelines issued by OSHA in 2011, which will be used against you. This is what the compliance officers use when an incident occurs, which will be used against you because it's a standard and only courts can set and adopt standards that juries will use to judge you. And they're going to use OSHA compliance officer guidelines against you. Who's the responsible officer in your organization for all of these safety-related regulations under federal law? The CEO. So says SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, saying that he or she is civilly responsible, personally responsible, and criminally responsible. Does your CEO know this? Shouldn't they? Wouldn't you? Because this can be the way your CEO looks like once we have one of these things and he or she hasn't responded. Failure to plan, failure to train. And it goes beyond the CEO. Trustees and directors and senior operations people like you can join the parade of orange jumpsuit. And the most important planning and training issues are command, control, and communications. We need somebody in command. We have to exercise control to a team of people to alert, run, hide, and fight. And we have to be able to communicate with each other. And we have to be able to do so quickly. Then there's training. Great plans are a smart thing. Training is everything. We've got to get the words off of paper in order to, into people's heads in order to make this work. So training is mandatory under OSHA regulations. We have to train all employees in a classroom annually at a hire by a qualified trainer, qualified by experience and or training, says OSHA. So that's what it has to look like as far as training your people regarding all emergencies. And as you can see, this has to be applied to workplace violence and active shooters. On-screen training can supplement. It can never substitute for the annual classroom training. And we have to include contractors. All of this is in and the result of, with court and administrative decisions of these citations, 1910, 38, and 39. And remember, we train people because police, fire, and EMTs are not the first responders. Employees are the first responders. And we don't rise to the occasion. In an emergency, we do not rise to the occasion. I'm going to burst your bubbles, ladies and gentlemen. Bruce Willis does not exist. The idea that the itinerant visitor in your facility during a workplace violence situation will suddenly rise up and save everybody's lives is pure Hollywood. It's total fiction. We don't rise to the occasion during an emergency. We sink to our level of training. And if untrained, we just sink. And then I hear this from senior management. Employees hate this stuff. We'll scare them. They don't want to come to training. This is all bull. Why do I know that? Because the research says that when asked across America what is on employees' minds as far as their most important issue at work, 85% come back and say safety is the number one, the most important issue at work, beating out all the other things I thought would be number one, from wages to overtime to vacation. All of which were distant number twos, under 50%. 85% say number one issue is safety. I have trained 24,000 employees like yours across America over the last 14 years. I give them a survey afterwards asking them if they are confident that they know what to do in an emergency. And the survey is anonymous and confidential, and I have them hand it to me, not to their bosses. 98.5% say that they are confident now that they know how to take care of themselves during an emergency. Now, we know, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't because of my boyish charm. It's because we took the scary out of the discussion, made everybody comfortable, empowered everybody to know what to do, because we also get them out of denial. This is the danger. I've learned the scariest work in your workplace, the scariest word in your workplace is not cost, it's not price, it's not budget, it's not headcount, it's change. Organizations hate change. It's painful, it's time-consuming, it's expensive. Did I mention painful? We hate change, and I've learned that in all organizations, change almost always occurs because of blunt force trauma from the outside, never by inspired leadership from the inside, unless that you are now going to turn into that inspired leader to get something done in your workplaces. So what's my action plan? First, you need an assessment of your organization's current emergency planning and training to see if it's good enough to take care of all the tactical responses we talked about today. And you should do so just like you do your financial audits on a regular basis. And you should have an outside independent party do that for you, just like your financial audits, because that's the only thing that will stand in front of anybody who is a third party regarding whether or not your audit was a good one and not a subject of internal politics. So the next step, as far as another next step, would be to do a workplace violence TTX, that stands for tabletop exercise, in your workplace. Take a couple of hours, put them in the room, the senior manager in the room with a facilitator, and take them through a number of workplace violence scenarios. You'll immediately see that no one knows what they're doing, identify the gaps, and then go fix them. So how do we sell this HCWSI? It won't be easy, but that's our mission, the safety of all personnel. And as far as an action plan is concerned for you and help for you, if you want a copy of this presentation, we'll make that available to you. I can offer you myself the 10 Commandments of Emergency Planning for organizations like yours that has all the legal citations in it as far as planning is concerned, and the 10 Commandments of Emergency Training. What are the federal regulations regarding training your employees? And you can reach me at that address as far as making that happen and getting you this information so you can be that inspired leadership on the inside who acts before the emergency, not afterwards. Thank you very much for your attention, and we're ready for any questions.
So, Bo, we have a ton of questions. We're going to do a lightning round on this to try and get as many done. But I just want to check with you first that we're not likely going to get to all of them. Will you be okay with us getting the questions to you and then you sending out, via email to everybody the answers to those questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. One person asked, he's seen many terms, hold and secure versus shelter in place versus lockdown. Any difference in those? Do they mean different things?
Yeah, they can mean a lot of different things. A lockdown can be very, very different in a school than versus a hospital, than versus a high-rise, than versus a manufacturing setting. It's all very site-specific, and you really need an expert probably from the outside, because as smart as you think you are, you really don't know this stuff. This is pretty articulated, and I would get that expert, whoever that is, inside. It could be somebody from law enforcement, although that's very difficult because they're undermanned and don't have time to pay enough attention to you. But you really need somebody to come in and define what a lockdown is and what a lockout is, which could be very important, and shelter in place and hold. All those things have to be defined in very, very strict detail and then trained.
Okay, so leads to the next question. Someone asked two-part question. The first was, are there white papers? In other words, the PowerPoints are great, your content is great, but it's drinking from a fire hose. Is there something they could read, white paper-wise, something along those lines? And then, having gone through that form of education, what you've just gone through here, and on the other sources, would you recommend that they drill and practice with the local law enforcement?
It's always best to involve law enforcement, if not to do the assessment, to certainly do a walkthrough. They want to be familiar with the battleground when they have to come there. So working with them and trying to entice them to come to your facility, if nothing else for a walkthrough, a drill would be great. And a live exercise where they actually go through, dress for the party, carrying weapons, perhaps on a weekend or an off hour. They would love to do that, but you have to work very, very hard to get their attention to make that happen. As far as the white papers are concerned, I've given you two here. While they won't answer all of your questions, you got to know what the compliance issues are, and that's what the 10 Commandments of Planning and the 10 Commandments of Training are.
Okay. Is it important to have photos on file for all of your employees, especially, for example, if the shooter is a disgruntled employee, and what if there are multiple shooters? Really two questions.
Outstanding question, and a very important question, because we talked about what it is that you're going to be responsible for as this unfolds in the initial incident and as we go along. They're going to want a lot of information from you, identifying friend from foe, floor maps, IDs of all of the employees, your contractors, and as happens in so many facilities now, images of the visitors as well, because your picture is snapped as you check in. So yes, they're going to want all that information. And that's very, very difficult to get on a quick basis, which means you have to plan all this out ahead of time and make it available to them for an active shooter, a fire, because you're going to have a head count for a fire as well. All of these things make it mandatory, in my view, that you put together this information and have it available outside and mobile and remotely.
Okay, and we're at like an hour and 10. I think I'm gonna have to stop here just in deference to everybody else. So we've got a whole bunch more questions left, so we'll get those to you. So first off, Bo, thank you very much. Great presentation. For information about Bo's services, visit 911consulting.net, and remember to visit continuityhousing.com or leave a comment in the survey if you're interested in how they can provide your critical employees guaranteed housing when you need it most. And you'll get a brief survey that pops up at the end of this webinar when you close your browser. Please, we very much appreciate any comments you have, but in particular, if you answer those questions, that helps us to improve these presentations for you. So if you would take that time, we would be most appreciative. For Bo Mitchell of 911 Consulting, Continuity Housing, and Fred and Michelle there, and Association Contingency Planners, and Alyssa, myself, Ed Goldberg, thank you for joining us today. Have a great day and a productive week.